All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And in this Saturday afternoon live stream, I want to dive into the history of transhumanist thought. And so in today's stream, what we're going to be doing is actually reading a prominent article, academic paper written by transhumanist philosopher Nick Bostrom. And Nick Bostrom is a Swedish scholar, philosopher, who is currently in residence over at Oxford in the UK. And he is prominent as the sort of concerning voice in the development of artificial intelligence and transhumanist yearnings, human potentiality, cyborgs, and extending human life indefinitely. And so he's sort of noted for being concerned about the limits of artificial intelligence, and once it surpasses, as he claims, human intelligence, that we could be in quite a quandary where the robots become more advanced than the humans. And this is related to actually a paper called Darwin Amongst the Machines. This was a prominent paper written in, I think, the late of the 1980s. And it talked about how this particular gentleman, I believe also a philosopher, believed that robots and various forms of artificial intelligence was undergoing an evolutionary process. Get it? Darwin Amongst the Machines. And that they would then evolve faster than biological matter could evolve. And this was then a real existential problem for humanity. What's interesting, though, despite Nick Bostrom being very concerned about the capacities of artificial intelligence and where it may lead in the future, he's ironically a great supporter of it. And so we kind of see the similar stance as Elon Musk, who goes on Joe Rogan and warns the world about the reality of artificial intelligence and human population collapse and all these different things. Yet, meanwhile, he is in fact a supporter of artificial intelligence. And Tesla AI, I just did a stream previously on living cyborgs, in which the N1 chip related to Neuralink's research is actually put into your brain by a robot. And so the robot will cut a piece of your skull open, and it will then implant the N1 probe into your brain. So Nick Bostrom, despite being a prominent philosopher of transhumanism, is, of course, a great promoter of it. And he thinks that we as humanity can sort of guide and steer this process, and that there's nothing wrong with wanting us to live indefinitely. That's basically the goal. And so I'm not going to have too much of an opening monologue here. I want to dive right into his article, because that's what we're going to be doing, is reading his article and him basically laying out the history of transhumanist thought, and the point showing that many of the things that I've talked to you guys about are agreed upon by those who support transhumanism, meaning the sort of alchemical, magical yearning for immortality is the sentiment at the bedrock of transhumanism itself. And so whether it be the elixir of life, there's always been this quasi-spiritual and then ironically scientific yearning to use the capacity of our technological creations to extend ourselves. And so I have a few books here. As you guys know, this is a topic that I've been trying to consume quite extensively. And my goal here in the next 6 months or so is to basically have consumed all the academic literature on transhumanism. And regarding today's topic, the history of transhumanist thought, there's 3 books that I've been working through that I wanted to share with you guys, just so you might know about them. The first one is The Religion of Technology, and this is a really useful book. The Religion of Technology, The Divinity of Man and the Spirit of Invention. Now, David Noble is a Marxist scholar, so as they say, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And so in this circumstance, David Noble is a Marxist critical scholar. I believe he's already passed, but one of his major contributions was his criticism of technology and where it is moving. And so him being a Marxist scholar and a critical theorist, and in many ways I disagree with his theoretical approach to scholarship itself, he has a great book, and this is really, really useful. And so despite me not being a Marxist, his critique of what he calls the religion of technology is very insightful. And in this first chapter, which I've only got through here, so I've only just begun to dive into this book, but in the first chapter, I was absolutely riveted in where he began to describe the origins of the religion of technology as he described it. And so when we look at transhumanism, what's really interesting is it's sort of parallel with Christianity or Christian theology about the divinization of man. And so he makes this really interesting point, of course, totally ignorant of orthodoxy, Orthodox history, church history, and sort of denotes Christianity as Roman Catholicism. But, however, he makes a point here that I think is really, really astute, and that is he traces the beginning of the religion of technology in medieval Western Christianity. In fact, he talks about the Frankish people and the development of Charlemagne's kingdom. We know that this is a great, this leads to the schism, the Great Schism itself in 1054 between the East and the Western Church. And that Catholicism saw quite the opportunity to basically acquire Western Europe and develop its own empire. This is what the Holy Roman Empire was, and this began with the Frankish king Charlemagne. And so David Noble makes the point that it is about this time that a new sentiment emerges in Western Christianity, particularly he talks about with the Franks, which then leads to Benedictine monasteries, and various Catholic monks and theologians begin to associate technology as the redemptive arc of us getting back to that prelapsarian space. Now, what did I just say? I'm talking about, he believes, or he notes that there is a transition in man's relationship to the technological creations he makes around the medieval period in Western Christianity, particularly with the Franks and Charlemagne's period. So we're talking 800s, and then he makes cases into the 11th, 12th, and 13th century, where various scholars these are Catholic theologians, begin to equate our building of architecture, of buildings, mechanical creations themselves, as man extending himself in the ways in which the fall took capabilities away. And so then our technological advancement was part of a spiritual advancement back to our own pre-fallen state, the prelapsarian state. And that I found really, really interesting, because I think that is true, right? The absence of the doctrine of theosis within Western Christianity especially right around the time of the schism, right around Charlemagne, well, we see this sentiment of man being divinized. Of course, orthodoxy, it's all about the uncreated energies of God, engaging in that process of theosis in which we become divinized by grace. However, absent in Western Christianity, technology becomes associated with the process of our own divinization. And so there is this subtle distinction regards the theosis concept. Now, obviously, there is no theosis doctrine in the West, sanctification, stuff like that, to some degree or not. But this book, I think, at least in this first chapter, I think really hits at something. I'll just read the closing paragraphs here to show you kind of what he's getting at. And now, again, he's a Marxist scholar, so he's very critical of Christianity. He's talking about Christianity, you see, gave birth to the idea of transhumanism as an authentic enterprise for man's divinization because they claim God actually became a man. And this is a unique doctrine in world religion. Muhammad wasn't God. The Buddha wasn't God. The avatars of Hinduism aren't understood in the same hypostatic way that we understand the person of Christ. So Christianity is unique in its claiming of the incarnation of God, being both fully human and fully God. And so then his criticism of Christianity, of course, as Orthodox, he's really just criticizing Western Christianity and really post-schism Christianity, which we would say exactly. Whether it be scholasticism, the development of then what becomes philosophy itself, I think it's the continuation of really a sort of Gnostic sentiment. Because divinization and orthodoxy is through the limiting of my will or the aligning of my will with God's will. This is not necessarily an existential pursuit. I don't pursue my own divinization and orthodoxy. I'm trying to submit myself to the church, to the hierarchy, to Christ, and to that entire reality. But in the West, as this new transition emerges, it's the existential yearning of man through his technology. And it is a sort of Gnosticism. And I've talked about a really good book that's called Technosis by Eric Davis. Now, again, another psychonaut and sort of promoter of these worldviews. But let me just read the last two paragraphs in the first chapter of, again, the religion of technology. Inspired by Erigena's ideas, Hugh, likewise, Hugh of St. Victor, we're talking about, linked the mechanical as well as the liberal arts directly to salvation and the restoration of fallen man. Although as an Augustinian, Hugh identified technology exclusively with the fallen world and with the first act of fallen man, the making of clothing, he nevertheless maintained in a marked departure from Augustine that the useful arts constituted a means of recovering mankind's perfection, his original divine image. Following Erigena, Hugh believed that the prelapsarian perfection was not solely spiritual, as Augustine had argued, but physical as well. Hence, he argued that the work of restoration included the repair of man's physical life, as well as the spiritual. For Hugh, according to medievalist Elspeth Whitney, quote, the mechanical arts supply the remedies for our physical weaknesses as a result of the fall, and like the other branches of knowledge are ultimately subsumed under the religious task of restoring our true prelapsarian nature. Hence, through its relationship to man's final end, the pursuit of the mechanical arts acquired religious and moral sanction. This, then, is what the arts are concerned with, wrote Hugh of St. Victor. This is what they intend, namely, to restore us with divine likeness. With Hugh, the monastic reception of the useful arts was fully articulated as a means of reunion with God himself, a theme sustained in the 13th century by Michael Scott, who held that, quote, the primary purpose of the human sciences is to restore fallen man to his prelapsarian position, and by the Franciscan friar Bonaventure, who likewise, quote, sanctified the mechanical arts and placed them in the context of knowledge whose source and goal is the light of God, unquote. Such work by a canon a layman, and a mendicant friar, not only further ratified the moral virtuousness of useful arts, but also helped to spread such monastic ideas beyond the cloister, fostering in Europe a unique emotional commitment to machinery grounded upon, quote, an acceptance of mechanisms as aids to the personal spiritual life. Bam, that is a lot right there. But that's why, again, I would recommend this book if you're interested in diving deeper into this topic, the history of transhumanist thought. I'm sure I'll have more streams coming out of this book here. Now, a couple other ones I just want to mention to you guys, we're not going to be reading any excerpts from, is this is a really well-written book, Transhumanism, The History of a Dangerous Idea. Now, obviously, it's coming from somebody who already has a critical lens, who is very negative on the transhumanist movement. However, this is really well cited, and this book has all the footnotes, which if you're a scholar like myself, you love the footnotes. It's all about the footnotes when you're doing research. And so it is very well cited. It is personally published, so it's not Oxford Press or anything like that, but this is a really good book trying to do the exact same thing. So if that's something you might be interested in, you can get that off Amazon. And then here's another book that, again, I haven't worked through this one yet either. Let's see if you can, here it goes this way. Gods and Robots. And what this is about, this is a book, here it is. Again, this is Princeton University Press, Gods and Robots, Myths, Machines, and Ancient Dreams of Technology. And what this scholar does is look at various Greek mythologies and look for the sort of transhumanist yearning, again, that man sort of escapes his dilemma through technology. And so here's just, again, some of the chapter titles. The Robot and the Witch, Talos and Medea, Medea's Cauldron of Rejuvenation, The Quest for Immortality and Eternal Youth, Beyond Nature, Enhanced Powers Borrowed from Gods and Animals, and he goes on. Pandora, Beautiful, Artificial, Evil, Between Myth and History, Real Automata, and Lifelike Artifices in the Ancient World. Again, so a lot of interesting stuff here that it is rooting these ideas all the way back into ancient Greece. So our article by Nick Bostrom today is not going to go that far, but he will go to the links that I talk about in regards to alchemy, magic, the pursuit. Thank you very much, Dr. Mo. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much. And so Nick Bostrom's article is not going to dive all the way back to Greek myths, or not even going to go back to, medieval Europe in regards to some of the theological presuppositions of Catholicism and its relationship to technology. He's going to basically start at, there's always been, the Taoist immortals questing for the elixir of life, the elixir of immortality, and then you have all the European alchemists. And so he basically will begin, and as we read his article, he basically begins with a reference to alchemy as a sort of beginning synthesis of spirituality, magic, and science, if you will. Obviously, alchemy is a sort of precursor to chemistry, which had a lot of spiritual sentiments wrapped up into its analysis of various natural substances. So the history of transhumanism then is all about life extension being the core of this ideology. And so death is the common entity. And that's why I think it's so interesting to look at transhumanism as a spiritual idea that really is very subtly related to our Christian paradigm. Because for both the Christian, the follower of Christ, the defeater of death, and for the transhumanist, the number one enemy is death itself. And that death, in our view, is unnatural because we're made in the image of God. But in the technologist's point of view, death is unnatural because it's something that man just hasn't conquered yet with his extension of self through technology. And so the question is, or what most transhumanists always argue then, is that the next stage of evolution is happening in the machines. I referenced again Darwin amongst the machines. This is a common sentiment amongst the advocates of transhumanism, is that evolution is now happening quicker on the machine level, on the robotics level, than it is at the biological level. And so biology, then it's outdated. It's a software, it's a hardware that's too slow in their eyes. Their eyes of, again, the speeding up of time and the pursuit of their sort of their particular goals. And so death is a commonality we both share. In regards to then the process of history, they view this as this continual progress, right? Technological progress. And it's all about technological progress. The next one is, and they then get into, what really is the relationship between human evolution and technological evolution? Well, they don't like to talk a whole lot about the negatives in regards to technology making people more illiterate, attention spans. In regards to the technology we have now, at least at the public level, you can make quite the argument that it's working in the opposite effect most people advocate that it's really doing. And so the other part that they always then mention is the transhumanist worldview is always tied to space travel. We're always supposed to be these cosmonauts, these astronauts traveling through space to other planets. For what purposes? I guess just to do it, right? Just to conquer it, just to demonstrate that sort of Francis Bacon, that Baconian yearning to dominate nature, right? You want to rape the secrets out of Mother Nature, he mentioned in his promotion of empiricism. And in a way, transhumanism does the exact same thing, because nothing is off limits when it comes to scientific experimentation and research. And I seriously mean that. Whether it be animals, whether it be humans, cutting people's skulls open, putting brain machine interfaces in, leaving part of their skull open. This has all already happened, and this has been happening. And just because we've only seen a few things here recently, we have to assume that this research, at least underground amongst whether it be the billionaire elite or at least the military industrial complex, has been doing this stuff for quite a while. Because if you didn't see in my stream on Living Cyborgs, they are now at the technological level. They can blend and fuse electronic machines into your central nervous system so that the electrical impulses from your brain, in fact, can then be transmuted into an electronic device, whether it be your arm, a leg, or various things that they're creating now. And so human potential is the name of the game. The way that they always frame transhumanism as a spiritual enterprise is that it's extending human potential, and that human potential is the point of religion and spirituality, and that the reason why people follow Jesus is because Jesus was God and we're men, and it wasn't really true, but what it does is it signifies our quest for further and higher development of our own innate potential. And so transhumanism, well, obviously that's just the religion of the future, because all those myths, all those religions, they're antiquated, they're not real. So the only thing that is real then is the extension of human potential, which was the utilitarian use of religion in the first place, and that we then can move into these higher states of transcendence. And I talked about how I think this was in my group with the members, but it's so funny that you start reading their literature about spirituality. I'm finishing Technosis, and one of those chapters has to do with techno-Zen, how these transhumanists, they feel like, okay, so the Zen master who meditates for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, then they put him under, a brain scan, and they can find what brain waves he's transmitting. And then what they can do now with the technology is they can just figure out what that frequency is. And then good old Joe Schmo, the transhumanist, he can just sit in the same chair that the Zen monk was in. They can put the head device on, and then they can put you in that exact brainwave state. And this is considered by the people who support this as how this is jumping, again, the problem with biology itself, right? Well, the Zen monk, he had to do that for 25 years. We don't have 25 years, but because of technology, we can get from A to B today. And so you can have the same brain waves as an enlightened Zen monk today with your new techno head device. So human potential is always the framing, the rhetorical framing of why they're doing what they're doing, and why what they're doing is absolutely good, innately good. Because the problem with many of these transhumanists is they're all Darwinist, And they don't really have a structure for metaphysics. I have yet to hear a transhumanist say that they believed in a theistic God. Almost all of them. I was watching an interview with Natasha Vita Moore, arguably the most famous female scholar or promoter of transhumanism, her and her husband Max Moore. Go look her up. She's 72 years old. She's doing everything she can to preserve her youth. But Max Moore, her husband, down in Arizona, literally has a cryonics lab where he's freezing people. And so the whole point is that they've been able to develop these processes known as vitrification. And so the cryopreservation, people say, well, what do they do? Like, if they freeze your body, when you thaw it, you're going to get water everywhere. Well, that's not what they're doing. So it's not like they're just putting you in a freezer and then you're covered in icicles. No, it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. And here I can show you exactly what it is. So here's Nick Bostrom. But what they do is cryopreservation. And it's a process where organisms, organelles, cells, tissues, extracellular matrix, organs, and other biological constructs susceptible to damage caused by unregulated chemical kinetics are preserved by cooling to very low temperatures. Roughly negative 112 degrees Fahrenheit, using solid carbon dioxide, liquid, and using liquid nitrogen at low enough temperatures, and enzymatic and chemical activity which might cause damage to the biological material in question is effectively stopped. Cryopreservation methods seek to reach low temperatures without causing additional damage caused by the formation of ice crystals during freezing. Traditional cryopreservation has relied on coating the material to be frozen with a class of molecules termed cryptoprotectants. New methods are being investigated due to the inherent toxicity of many cryptoprotectants. Cryptopreservation of animal genetic resources is done with the intervention of conservation of the breed. So Natasha Vita Moore actually performed an experiment. I think this was in 17, 18, somewhere around there, maybe been earlier, where she took a rat who had been trained in a particular maze, pattern, puzzle, and she then performed the cryopreservation. And so they froze the animal till it was extensively dead, so it's no longer living. And then they brought the animal back to life with the process known as vitrification. Vitrification is the transformation of a substance into a glass, that is to say, a non-crystalline amorphous solid. However, if you go down here, the most common applications are in the making of pottery glass and some types of food, but there are many others, such as the vitrification of an antifreeze-like liquid in cryopreservation. And so what Natasha Vita Moore demonstrated in an experiment is that she could take a rat, she could train him to a puzzle, they could then freeze the rat. It could be extensively dead for a period of time. They could vitrify it back to life, bring the rat back to life, and the rat did, in fact, remember the puzzle that it was trained to know. That is an experiment that has been performed. Again, just letting you know the state of this technology. Now, the article we're going to be reading is this one right here from the Journal of Evolution and Technology, The History of Transhumanist Thought by Nick Bostrom, Faculty of Philosophy at Oxford University. Now, here is the link. I'm going to post that here in the live chat for anybody who would like to have that link themselves. You can do that right there. And so I'm not going to be using the URL. I've already downloaded this, and we'll be using that version. Okay, so with that being said, let's just take care of a little bit of housekeeping real quick, and then we'll dive right back into everything. Guys, the best way, if you would appreciate what we're doing here at Church of the Eternal Logos and you'd like to support, the best way you could do so is becoming a website member for $5 a month. We will be having our first Logos Fitness meeting, which is $15 a month this coming Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to be meeting, obviously not this coming Tuesday, but moving forward, we'll be meeting on the first Tuesday of every month. for fitness updates, encouragement, accountability, all that type of stuff, no matter what type of fitness or physical activity you're interested in. And then if you'd like to become a Logos Premium member who has access to all the fitness stuff as well as the exclusive video library, you can do that for $25 a month. And that is the link that I just posted there. If anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session to talk about whatever topic you might be interested in, and have my undivided attention, you can do so with that link right there. And then if anybody would like to sponsor a stream, of which our next stream is going to be a phenomenal topic on this book, Bowling Alone. Shout out to Jeremy Hosey. We're going to be diving into this book, and I promise that book's going to be more insightful than you think it was. It was definitely more insightful than I was expecting when I read it, and I thank Jeremy for sponsoring that stream and forcing me to read this book, because the information within it is quite interesting, and I can't wait to share it with all you guys, probably Monday, since I was going to do this stream yesterday and do that stream Sunday, so I'll probably do this stream today and then that stream Monday. So anyways, really looking forward to that. That's enough of the housekeeping. Now let's just get back to our stream here. Now, I want to, before we read, I do want to demonstrate a little bit of this Nick Bostrom guy. So again, if you look at his Wikipedia, they say, oh, well, he's a bestseller of 200 publications, and what he writes about is the existential risk, the anthropic principle, human enhancement ethics, superintelligent risk, and the reversal test. In 2011, he founded the Oxford Martin Program on the impacts of future technology and the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University. And so you think, oh, wow, this guy, he must be coming out, he must be critical of a lot of this stuff. I mean, he's a philosopher of it. He's at all these prestigious institutions. But then you go down and you realize he actually founded the World Transhumanist Association, which now goes by the name Humanity Plus, which is now run by Natasha Vita-More. And so his whole thing is that he believes we're living in a simulation, so he's one of those people. And he's not against any of this technology, really. Once you start finding out what his opinions are, he's not against it. He just thinks there are potential concerns, and that, yeah, it's potential that the AI could wake up, become sentient, and kill all the humans. And that's why we just have to become more ethical. But so again, as you would know, these people have no basis for objective ethics. They have no basis for any sort of universal claim, whether it be about metaphysics, ethics, or truth. These people are Darwinists. So in fact, our observation of nature is always changing. Nature's always changing. It's in a process of evolution, and therefore truth is always changing. It's also in a process of evolution. So even if they were to make a universal truth claim, it's always couched in the context of, well, it's true now. That's why pragmatism's about the most sophisticated way you can go if you still wanted to be a Darwinist. So anyways, now let's just dive into this article and start reading it, because that's what we're going to be doing rest of the stream here, is just reading this article. Okay. So Nick Bostrom, Faculty of Philosophy at Oxford University. This paper traces the cultural and philosophical roots of transhumanist thought and describes some of the influences and contributions that led to the development of contemporary transhumanism. So are you guys able to see this? Is this big enough? I assume people who are watching in 1080p can probably see and read the paper. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. So if that is useful, okay, I'll leave it at that size there. Okay, let's now dive into this. So it's 20-some pages, so we're going to be here for a minute, and that's really the point of today's stream. So bear with me, put on your thinking caps, and we're going to read this article, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of comments. I've already read it as we go through. So part 1, cultural and philosophical antecedents. The human desire to acquire new capacities is as ancient as our species itself. We have always sought to expand the boundaries of our existence, be it socially, geographically, or mentally. There's a tendency in at least some individuals always to search for a way around every obstacle and limitation to human life and happiness. Ceremonial burial and preserved fragments of religious writings show that prehistoric man and women were deeply disturbed by the death of loved ones. Although the belief in an afterlife was common, this did not preclude efforts to extend the present life. In the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, A king sets out on a quest for immortality. Gilgamesh learns that there exists by a natural means a herb that grows at the bottom of the sea. He successfully retrieves the plant, but a snake steals it from him before he can eat it. And I think that's apropos. Again, I believe ultimately this transhumanist technology, this quest for immortality outside the following of Christ, immortality within this world, this fallen world, I believe is certainly led by the serpent, led by the evil one. And so I think it's apropos semiotically that even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh doesn't get the immortality he was desired. The serpent steals it from him. And I think the people who are pursuing it are also under the aegis of the serpent still. In later times, explorers sought the fountain of youth, alchemists labored the concept of the elixir of life, and various schools of esoteric Taoism in China strove for physical immortality by way of control over the harmony control over or harmony with the forces of nature. The boundary between mythos and science, between magic and technology was blurry, and almost all conceivable means of the preservation of life was attempted by somebody or other. While other explorers made many interesting discoveries, and alchemists invented some useful things such as new dyes and improvements in metallurgy, the goal of life extension proved elusive. The quest to transcend our natural confines, however, has long been viewed with ambivalence. On the one hand, there is fascination. On the other hand, there is a concept of hubris, that some ambitions are off limits and will backfire if pursued. The ancient Greeks exhibited this ambivalence in their mythology. Prometheus stole the fire from Zeus and gave it to the humans, thereby permanently improving the human condition. Yet for this act, he was severely punished by Zeus, and the myth of Daedalus, the gods were repeatedly challenged quite successfully by the clever engineer and artist who uses non-magical means to extend human capabilities. In the end, however, disaster ensues when his son Icarus ignores his paternal warnings and flies too close to the sun, causing the wax in his wings to melt. Medieval Christianity had similarly conflicted views about the pursuits of the alchemist who tried to transmutate substances, create homunculi in test tubes, and invent a panacea. Some scholastics, following the anti-experimentalist teachings of Aquinas, believed that alchemy was an ungodly activity. There were allegations that involved the invocation of demonic powers. But other theologians, such as Albert Magus, defended the practice. The otherworldliness and stale scholastic philosophy that dominated Europe during the medieval ages gave way to a renewed intellectual vigor in the Renaissance. Oh yes, the humanism. The human being and the natural world again became legitimate objects of study. Renaissance humanism encouraged people to rely on their own observations and their own judgment rather than to defer in every matter to religious authorities. Renaissance humanism also created the ideal of the well-rounded person who is highly developed scientifically, morally, culturally, and spiritually. So we see in one paragraph, he celebrates the decline of the dogmas of religious authority and the development of a scientifically, morally, culturally, and spiritually advanced man, the Renaissance man. However, I ask, where is the morals and the spirituality coming from exactly? Your worldview has no capability for those. Anyways, a landmark of the period is Giovanni Piccadella Mirandola's oration on the dignity of man, which I have over here, which proclaims that man does not have a ready-made form and is responsible for shaping himself. Now, mind you, Giovanni Piccadella Mirandola, he is famous for the development of what's called Christian Kabbalah. This is right around towards the end of the life of Marsilio Ficino, who translates the Hermetic Corpus into Latin. And according to more recent scholars, even pro-LGBTQ scholars, they like to claim Giovanni Piccadella Mirandola as their own. There's a bit of a controversy regarding how he died or why he died. He was from all historical records, an incredibly intellectually gifted young man. And it's believed that why he was killed at such a young age in Italy was because he was found sleeping with another man. We have made you a creature, neither of heaven nor of earth, neither mortal nor immortal, in order that you may, as the free and proud shaper of your own being, fashion yourself in the form you may prefer. It will be in your power to descend to the lower, brutish forms of life. You will be able, through your own decision, to rise again to the superior orders, whose life is divine. The Age of Enlightenment is often said to have started with the publication of Francis Bacon's Novum Organum, the New Tool, which proposes a scientific methodology based on empirical investigation rather than a priori reasoning. And this has to do, again, with the difference between the analytical and the continental schools of philosophy. This is moving into the Anglo-American or the Anglo-empirical tradition, is, again, Francis Bacon. Bacon advocated the project of, quote, effecting all things possible, by which he meant using science to achieve mastery over nature in order to prove the living condition of human beings. The heritage from the Renaissance combines with the influence of Isaac Newton, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, and Marquis de Condorcet, and others to form the basis of rational humanism, which emphasizes empirical science and critical reason rather than revelation and religious authority, as ways of learning about the natural world and our place within it and providing a grounding for morality. Transhumanism has roots in rational humanism. Oh yes, of course it does. In the 18th and 19th centuries, we begin to see glimpses of the idea that even humans themselves can be developed through the appliance of science. Condorcet speculated about extending human lifespan through medical science. It would be in the 1700s. Would it be absurd now to suppose that the improvement of the human race should be regarded as capable of unlimited progress, 1700s, mind you, that a time will come when death would result only from extraordinary accidents of the more and more gradual wearing out of vitality, and that finally, the duration of the average interval between birth and wearing out has itself no specific limit whatsoever. No doubt man will not become immortal, but cannot the span constantly increase between the moment he begins to live and the time when naturally, without illness or accident, he finds life a burden? Benjamin Franklin likewise longed wistfully for suspended animation, foreshadowing the cryonics movement. Again, that's what I laid out to you in regards to the extreme freezing of biological matter, which they have shown, as I said, through vitrification, to be able to bring back that tissue which they freeze, and even to revive, as I said, rats. That has been peer-reviewed and published. I wish it were possible to invent a method of embalming drowned persons in such a manner that they might be recalled to life at any period, however distant, for having a very ardent desire to see and observe the state of America 100 years hence. I should prefer to an ordinary death, being immersed with a few friends in a cask of Madeira, until that time, then it to be recalled back to life by the solar warmth of my dear country. But in all probability, we live in a century too little advanced and too near the infancy of science to see such an art brought to our time to its perfection. Again, that's Benjamin Franklin. And you see, even with this cryonics movement, with vitrification, the ability to freeze an animal, make it by all definition dead, and then bring it back to life, this is a sort of demonic resurrection. This, as I said, transhumanism is a subtle flip to our Christian paradigm in many ways. And I think the cryonics movement and the idea that they can take biological matter, freeze it for an indefinite period, and be able to always vitrify it and bring it back to life is basically the devil's scientific resurrection, right? It's a sort of demonic resurrection, in my opinion. Anyways, I move on. After the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species in 1859, it became increasingly plausible to view the current version of humanity not as the endpoint of evolution, but rather as a possibly quite early phase. The rise of scientific physicalism might also have contributed to the foundations of the idea that technology could be used to improve the human organism. For example, a simple kind of materialist view was badly proposed in 1750 by the French physician and materialist philosopher Julien Offray de la Mettrie in The Human Machine, where he argued that man is but an animal or a collection of springs which wind each other up. If human beings are constituted by matter that obeys the same laws of physics that operate outside us, then it should be in principle possible to learn to manipulate human nature in the way that we manipulate external objects. Okay, so that claim right there, again, by philosopher Nick Bostrom. This is an Oxford University philosopher who, again, if we go back to his credentials, he's gone to Yale. He studied under Van Quine, William Von Quine. He studied at all these major universities. And he doesn't realize that human nature isn't a physical thing to be manipulated like other objects in the external world. Human nature has to do with metaphysical categorization of things themselves and what maintains the multiplicity of things as categories. Now, of course, as a Darwinist, he doesn't ultimately believe in that. He doesn't ultimately believe that human nature is a non-changing metaphysical reality. And so then for them, what is human nature? Well, human nature is just basically how the brain works, our perception of the world. Again, transhumanism reduces the human person down to a brain, an absolute brain. And this is this will be another stream in the future, but I've been thinking about how interesting the relationship of Buddhism is, because the spirituality that the transhumanists always like to appeal to is Buddhism. And Buddhism, likewise, does not have the concept of a soul. It's anatman. It's the lack of a soul. It's the no self. And so Buddhism also basically reduces the person to a mind. And the mind is the problem. It's due to your desiring, which is why you're suffering, and it's creating all these delusions, which is the illusion, which is Maya. And so it's basically trying to rework and reorient the mind to see the world correctly so you can burn your karma so you won't be reincarnated again. And so this reduction of the human person to basically an abstract mind, I think, now all Buddhism doesn't do this necessarily, but I think the why transhumanists appeal to Buddhism so regularly is because likewise its sort of anthropological emphasis is on the human mind. You ask what the mind is, well, all these people are probably going to believe in some type of an emergent theory of mind. They don't even believe in a real mind. They just get back to, well, mind is the collective processes of the brain that are firing the neurons and the chemicals. So it still gets back to matter and the chemicals. Anyways, moving on. It has been said that the Enlightenment expired as the victim of its own excesses. It gave way to Romanticism and to latter-day reactions against the rule of instrumental reason and the attempt to rationally control nature, such as can be found in some postmodernist writings, the New Age movement, deep environmentalism, and in some parts of the anti-globalization movement. Oh, yes, the people who aren't for globalism, yeah. However, the Enlightenment's legacy, including a belief in the power of human rationality and science, is still an important shaper of modern culture. In his famous 1784 essay, What is Enlightenment?, Immanuel Kant summed it up as follows. Enlightenment is man's leaving his self-caused immaturity. Gosh, come on. Immaturity, that is, the incapacity to use one's own understanding without the guidance of another. Such immaturity is self-caused if its cause is not lack of intelligence, but by lack of determination and courage to use one's intelligence without being guided by another. The motto, enlightenment, is therefore, have courage to use your own intelligence. It might be thought that the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche would have been a major inspiration for transhumanism. Nietzsche, in his famous For the Doctrine of the Übermensch, I teach you the Overman, the Übermensch. Man is something that shall be overcome. Our biological nature, the state in which you exist right now, needs to be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? All beings so far have created something beyond themselves, and you want to be the ebb of this great flood and even go back to the beast rather than overcome man? What Nietzsche had in mind, however, was not technological transformation, but a rather kind of soaring personal growth and cultural refinement in exceptional individuals who he thought would have to overcome the life-sapping slave morality of Christianity. Despite some surface-level similarities with the Nietzschean vision, transhumanism, with its Enlightenment roots, its emphasis on the individual liberties, and its humanistic concern for the welfare of all humans and other sentient beings, probably has as much more in common with Nietzsche's contemporary J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill, an English liberal thinker and utilitarian. Yeah, I would say you could probably kind of slice those together. Section 2 now. We've reached Section 2. Guys, please smash that like for everybody's here. I'd greatly appreciate that. Hope everybody's enjoying their Saturday. Section 2 is speculation, science fiction, and 20th century totalitarianism. In 1923, the noted British biochemist J.B.S. Haldane published the essay Daedalus, Science and the Future, in which he argued that great benefits would come from controlling our own genetics and from science in general. He projected a future society that would be richer, have abundant clean energy, where genetics would be employed to make people taller, healthier, and smarter, and where the use of ectogenesis, gestating fetuses in artificial wombs, would become commonplace. He also commented on what has in more recent years become known as the yuck factory. The chemical or physical inventor is always a Prometheus. There is no great invention, from fire to flying, which has not been hailed as an insult to some god. But if every physical and chemical invention is a blasphemy, every biological invention is a perversion. There is hardly one which on first being brought to the notice of an observer from any nation which has not previously heard of their existence, would not appear to him as indecent and unnatural. Okay, so I guess he's making the claim for cultural context, culturally constructed moralities. Haldane's essay became a bestseller and set off a chain reaction for future-oriented discussions, including The World, the Flesh, and the Devil by J.D. Bernal in 1929, which speculated about space colonization and bionic implants as well as mental improvements through advanced social science and psychology. The works of Olaf Stapledon, a philosopher and science fiction author, and the essay Icarus, The Future of Science in 1924 by Bernard Russell. Russell took a more pessimistic view, arguing that without more kindliness in the world, technological power would mainly serve to increase man's ability to inflict harm on one another. Science fiction authors such as H.G. Wells and Stapledon got many people thinking about the future evolution of the human race. Here's our man Aldous Huxley coming into the conversation. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, has had an enduring impact on debates about human technological transformation, matched by few other works of fiction. A possible exception would be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1818. Huxley describes a dystopia where psychological conditioning, promiscuous sexuality, biotechnology, and the opiate drug soma are used to keep the population placid and contented in a static, totally conformist caste society that is governed by 10 world controllers. Children are manufactured in fertility clinics and artificially gestated. The lower castes are chemically stunted and deprived of oxygen during their maturation process to limit their physical and intellectual development. From birth, members of every caste are indoctrinated during their sleep by recorded voices repeating the slogans of the official Fordist religion, and are conditioned to believe that their own caste is the best one to belong to. The society depicted in the Brave New World is often compared to and contrasted with that of another influential 20th century dystopia, George Orwell's 1984. 1984 features a more overt form of oppression, including ubiquitous surveillance by, quote, Big Brother, and brutal police coercion. Huxley's world controllers, by contrast, rely on more humane means, including bioengineered predestination, soma, and psychological conditioning to prevent people from wanting to think for themselves. Herd mentality and promiscuity are promoted, while high art, individuality, knowledge of history, and romantic love are discouraged. It should be noted that in neither 1984 nor in Brave New World has technology been used to increase human capacities. Rather, society is set up to repress the full development of humanity. Both dystopias curtail scientific and technological exploration for fear of upsetting the social equilibrium. Nevertheless, Brave New World in particular has become an emblem of the dehumanizing potential of the use of technology to promote social conformism and shallow contentment. Yeah, I would absolutely say so. In the early decades of the 20th century, not only racists and right-wing ideologues, but also a number of left-leaning social progressives became concerned about the impact of medicine and social safety nets on the quality of the human gene pool. They believed that modern society enabled many unfit individuals to survive, individuals who would in earlier ages have perished, and they worried that this would lead to a deterioration of the human stock. As a result, many countries, including the USA, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Switzerland, implemented state-sponsored eugenics programs, which involve various degrees of infringement of individual rights. In the U.S., over 64,000 individuals were forcibly sterilized under eugenic legislation between 1907 and 1963. The principal victims of the American program were the mentally disabled, but the deaf, the blind, the epileptic, the physically deformed, orphans, and the homeless were also sometimes targeted. These programs are now almost universally condemned, but even widespread compulsory sterilization pales in comparison with the German eugenics program, which resulted in the systematic murder of millions of people who were regarded as inferior by the Nazis. The Holocaust left a scar in the human psyche. Determined not to let history repeat itself, most people developed an intrinsic revulsion to all ideas that could appear to have any kind of association with Nazi ideology. And yet, it must be remembered, history did repeat itself, e.g., the Rwandan genocide in 1994, in which the world did nothing but wring its hands of 800,000 Africans were slaughtered. In particular, the eugenics movement as a whole, in all its forms, became discredited because of the terrible crimes that had been committed in its name. Although some of the milder eugenics programs continued for many years before they were finally scrapped, the goal of creating a new and better world through a centrally imposed vision became passé. The Stalinist theory again underscored the dangers of totalitarian utopianism. In the post-war era, many optimistic futurists who had become suspicious of collectively orchestrated social change found a new home for their hopes in scientific and technological process. Space travel, medicine, and computers seemed to offer a path to a better world. The shift of attention also reflected the breathtaking pace of development taking place in these fields. Science had begun to catch up with speculation. Yesterday's science fiction was turning into today's science fact, or at least into a somewhat realistic midterm prospect. Transhumanist themes during this period were discussed and analyzed chiefly in the science fiction literature of authors such as Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, and Stanislaw Lem explored how technological development could come to profoundly alter the human condition. The word transhuman appears to have first been used by Aldous Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, a disgruntled biologist, who was also the first Director General of UNESCO and founder of the World Wildlife Fund. In Religion Without Revelation, he wrote, quote, "The human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself, not just sporadically, an individual here in one way, an individual there in another way, but in its entirety as humanity. We need a name for this new belief. Perhaps transhumanism will serve. Man remaining man, but transcending himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature." Section 3. technological genies, AI, the singularity, nanotech, and uploading. Human-like automata have always fascinated the human imagination. Mechanical engineers, since the early Greeks, have constructed clever self-moving devices. In Judaic mysticism, sorry about that, guys. Okay, here we go. In Judaic mysticism, a golem refers to an animated being crafted from inanimate material. In the early golem stories, the golem could be created by a holy person who was able to share some of God's wisdom and power through the golem. Not being able to speak was never more than a shadow of God's creation. Having a golem servant was the ultimate symbol of wisdom and holiness. In the latter stories, which had been influenced by the more Islamic concern about humanity getting too close to God, the golem became a creation of overreaching mystics who would inevitably be punished for their blasphemy. The story of the sorcerer's apprentice is a variation of this theme. The apprentice animates a broomstick to fetch water, but is unable to make the broom stop. Like a Frankenstein, a story of technology out of control. The word, quote, robot was coined by the Czech Karel Čapek in his dark play RUR in 1921, in which a robot labor force destroys its human creators. When the invention of the electronic computer, the idea of human-like automata graduated from the kindergarten of mythology to the school of science fiction. E.g. Isaac Asimov, Stanislav Lem, Arthur C. Clarke, and eventually to the College of Technological Prediction. Could continued progress in artificial intelligence lead to the creation of machines that can think in the same general way as human beings? Alan Turing gave an operational definition to this question in his classic, quote, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence in 1950, and predicted that computers would eventually pass what came to be known as the Turing test. In the Turing test, a human experimenter interviews a computer and another human via text interface, and the computer succeeds if the interviewer cannot reliably distinguish the computer from the human. Much ink has been spilled in debates on whether this test furnishes a necessary and sufficient condition for a computer being able to think, but what matters more from a practical perspective is whether and if so, when computers will be able to match human performance on tasks involving general reasoning ability. With the benefit of hindsight, we can say that many of the early AI researchers turned out to be overly optimistic about the timescale for their hypothetical development. Of course, the fact that we have not yet reached human-level artificial intelligence does not mean that we never will, and a number of people, e.g. Marvin Minsky, Hans Moravec, Ray Kurzweil, and Nick Bostrom, have put forward reasons for thinking that this could happen in the first half of this century. And generally speaking, guys, on this research, those that are really in favor of this stuff believe that this transhumanist future will be in fulfillment by 2040. So 2040, 2050 has now basically, whether it's Ray Kurzweil, Nick Bostrom, Max Moore, Natasha Vita Moore, all these major transhumanists backed by significant money, having real institutes, real endowments, real funds to do research. They believe they're going to be able to freeze people, vitrify people, change your body out like a car, different parts. Basically, they believe that life extension will be at the place of 120 years will be definitely probable by 2040. So just letting you know about their own timeline. Moving on. In 1958, Stanislav Ulam, referring to a meeting with John von Neumann. John von Neumann, very, very important figure in America in regards to the development of computers. And so computing theory, all types of inventions. I do recommend, if you've never heard of John von Neumann, you should look him up. One conversation centered on the ever-accelerating progress of technology and changes in the mode of human life, which gives the appearance of approaching some essential singularity in the history of race beyond which human affairs as we know them could not continue. John von Neumann was also one of the first people to theorize that the human brain was basically a computer. And so it worked but on the same sort of stimulus response to a degree. So that was another thing that he was very prominent and advocating and put forward. The rapidity of technological change in recent times leads naturally to the idea that continued technological innovation will have a large impact on humanity in the decades ahead. This prediction is strengthened if one believes that some of these variables that currently exhibit exponential growth will continue to do so, and that they will be among the main drivers of change. Gordon E. Moore, co-founder of Intel, noticed in 1965 that the number of transistors on a chip exhibited exponential growth. This led to the formation of Moore's Law, which states roughly that computing power doubles every 18 months to 2 years. More recently, Kurzweil has documented similar exponential growth rates and a number of other technologies. The world's economy, which is a kind of general index of humanity's productive capacity, has doubled about every 15 years in modern time. The singularity hypothesis, which von Neumann seems to have alluded to in the quoted passage above, is that these changes will lead to some kind of discontinuity. But nowadays, it often refers to a more specific prediction, namely that the creation of a self-improving artificial intelligence will at some point result in radical changes with a very short time span. This hypothesis was first clearly stated in 1965 by the statistician Jay Gould. This is a quote, let an ultra-intelligent machine be defined as a machine that can far surpass all the intellectual activities of any man, however clever. Since the design of machines is one of these intellectual activities, an ultra-intelligent machine could design even better machines. There would then unquestionably be an intelligence explosion, and the intelligence of man would be left far behind. Thus, the first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man need ever make. Guys, please smash that like for everybody who's still with me. Hope everybody's enjoying the stream. Please hit that like, and if you enjoy it and you would like to support, send in a super chat using the Streamlabs link, and I'm going to get to all the super chats here in a bit. Werner Vinge discussed this idea in a little bit more detail in his influential 1993 paper, Technological Singularity, in which he predicted, within 30 years we will have the technological means to create superhuman intelligence. Shortly after, the human era will be ended. Transhumanists today hold diverging views about the singularity. Some see it as likely scenario. Others believe that it is more probable there will never be any very sudden and dramatic changes as a result of progress in artificial intelligence. The singularity idea, let me highlight this. The singularity idea also comes in a somewhat different eschatological version, which traces its lineage in the writings of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a paleontologist and Jesuit theologian who saw an evolutionary telos in the development of an encompassing noosphere, a global consciousness, via physicist Frank Tipler, who argued that advanced civilizations might come to have a defining influence on the future evolution of the cosmos, and in the final moments of the Big Crunch, might manage to extract an infinite number of computations by harnessing the sheer energy of the collapsing matter. However, while these ideas might appeal to those who fancy a marriage between mysticism and science, they have not caught on either amongst the transhumanists or the larger scientific community. Current cosmological theories indicate that the universe will continue to expand forever, falsifying Tipler's prediction. But the more general point that the transhumanists might make is this context is that we need to learn to think about big picture questions without resorting to wishful thinking or mysticism. Big picture questions, including ones about our place in the world and the long-term fate of intelligent life, are part of transhumanism. However, these questions should be addressed in a sober, disinterested way, using critical reason and our best available scientific evidence. One reason why such questions are of transhumanist interest is that their answers might affect what outcomes we should expect from our own technological development, and therefore indirectly what policies it makes sense for humanity to pursue. In 1986, Eric Drexler published Engines of Creation, the first book-length exposition of molecular manufacturing. The possibility of nanotechnology had been anticipated by Nobel laureate physicist Richard Feynman in his famous after-dinner address in 1959 entitled "There is Plenty of Room at the Bottom," unquote. In his seminal work, Drexler not only argued for the feasibility of assembler-based nanotechnology, but also explored its consequences and began charting the strategic challenges possessed by its development. Drexler's later book, Nanosystems, supplied a more technical analysis that seemed to conform his original conclusions. To prepare the world for nanotechnology and work towards its safe implementation, he founded the Foresight Institute together with his then-wife, Christine Peterson, in 1986. In the last several years, nanotechnology has become big business, with worldwide research funding amounting to billions of dollars. Yet little of his work fits Drexler's ambitious vision of nanotechnology as an assembler-based, near-universal construction technology. The maintained nanotechnology community has sought to distance itself from Drexler's claims. The chemist Richard Smalley, noted Nobel laureate, has debated Drexler, asserting that non-biological molecular assemblers are impossible. To date, however, no technical critique of Drexler's work in the published literature has found any significant flaws in his reasoning. If molecular nanotechnology is indeed physically possible, as Drexler maintains, the question becomes just how difficult it will be to develop it and how long it will take. These issues are very difficult to settle in advance. If molecular nanotechnology should be developed, as Drexler envisions, it would have momentous ramifications. Here's a block quote. Coal and diamonds, sand and computer chips, cancer and healthy tissue. Throughout history, variations in the arrangement of atoms have distinguished the cheap from the cherished, the diseased from the healthy. Arranged one way, atoms make up soil, air, and water. Arranged another way, they make up ripe strawberries. Arranged one way, they make up homes and fresh air. Arranged another, they make up ash and smoke. Molecular nanotechnology would enable us to transform coal into diamonds, sand into supercomputers, and to remove pollution from the air and tumors from healthy tissue. In its mature form, it could help us abolish most disease and aging, make possible the reanimation of cryonics patients, enable affordable space colonization, and more ominously, lead to the rapid creation of vast arsenals of lethal and non-lethal weapons. Another hypothetical technology that would have a revolutionary impact is uploading the transfer of the human mind to a computer. This would involve the following steps. First, create a sufficiently detailed scan of a particular human brain. Perhaps by deconstructing it with nanobots, or by feeding thin slices of brain tissue into powerful microscopes for automatic image analysis. So you see, and this is true, they still believe this, that if they can properly scan the entire human brain, they can digitally recreate it, and basically if all those neural networks are still firing in the computer-based system, then you're going to experience yourself as the same. They basically think if they can just mimic your brain, they can recreate you and upload you. Second, from this scan, reconstruct the neuronal network that the brain implemented and combine this with the computational models of the different types of neurons. Third, emulate the whole computational structure on a powerful supercomputer. If successful, the procedure would result in the original mind. No, it wouldn't. Nobody even knows what it would do. They don't even have a concept for mind. These people don't even believe in the mind of a thing. Again, so it's all an emergent process. They have no idea if that would actually create an emergent mind based on their own theories and worldview. If successful, the procedure would result in the original mind with memory and personality intact being transferred to the computer, where it would then exist as software, and it could either inhabit a robot body or live in a virtual reality. While it is often thought that under a suitable circumstance, the upload would be conscious and that the original person would have survived the transfer to the new medium, individual transhumanists take different views on these philosophical matters. If either superintelligence or molecular nanotechnology or uploading or some other technology of a similar revolutionary kind is developed, the human condition could clearly be radically transformed. Even if one believed in the probability of this happening anytime soon is quite small, these prospects would nevertheless merit serious attention in review of their extreme impact. However, transhumanism does not depend on the feasibility of such radical technologies. Virtual reality, pre-implementation genetic diagnosis, genetic engineering, pharmaceuticals that improve memory, concentration, wakefulness, and mood, performance-enhancing drugs, cosmetic surgery, sex change operations, prosthetics, anti-aging medicine, closer human-computer interfaces. These technologies are already here and can be expected within the next few decades. And again, this article was written in 2005. So think about the transgender phenomenon. Was in no way as prominent as today. And if you listen to any of the transhumanists, they are absolute proponents of the transgender community and the idea that you'll not only be able to transition your biological matter, in regard to being a male, female, or whatever gender, or even an animal hybrid. These are all condoned and okay and supported within this community. So I love that they come out in that transgender surgeries and all this different stuff, anti-aging medicine, human computer interfaces. This is all part of the same revolution. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. You say that and people think you're like hodgepodging all these different various things together and like forcing a unified perspective or analysis. But again, the transhumanists themselves will tell you that all of these technologies, virtual reality, transgenderism, anti-aging medicine, again, blood, foreskin, human brain computer interfaces. These are all part of the same technological revolution. This is all part of the same humanist yearning, right? Yeah, exactly. It is. It's all part of the same cloister. These technologies are already here and can be expected within the next few decades. The combination of these technological capabilities as they mature could profoundly transform the human condition. The transhumanist agenda, which is too much such enhancement options safely available to all persons, will become increasingly relevant and practical in the coming years as these and other anticipated technologies come online. Section 4. The growth of grassroots. Benjamin Franklin wished to be preserved in a casa of Madeira and later recalled to life and regretted that he was living too near the infancy of science for this to be possible. Since then, science has grown up a bit. In 1962, Robert Edinger published the book The Prospect of Immortality, which launched the idea of cryonic suspension. Edinger argued that its medical technology seems to be constantly progressing, and since science has discovered that chemical activity comes to a complete halt at low enough temperatures, it should be possible to freeze a person today in liquid nitrogen and preserve the body until a time when technology is advanced enough to repair the freezing damage and reverse the original cause of deanimation. Cryonics, Edinger believed, offered a ticket to the future. And this is, again, as I said, guys, Natasha Vita-More has already, this article was written in 2005. I think it was like 15, 16, 17, 2000, somewhere around there, that Natasha Vita-More educated a rat, learned a puzzle, learned a maze. Then they cryonically froze that rat. For all intents and purposes, it was dead. It was not alive for multiple days. And then they vitrified it, brought the rat back to life, and the rat remembered the puzzle that it was trained to before cryonics. That's the state of this technology today. Alas, the masses did not line up for the ride. Cryonics has remained a fringe alternative to more traditional methods of treating the terminally diseased, such as cremation and burial. However, again, this is before Max Moore, the husband of Natasha Vita Moore. This is his whole thing, is he's really, really into the cryonics, and he owns his own place in Arizona where very wealthy people come to get the ticket, so that they will be cryonically preserved. I'm talking people like Bill Gates, the billionaires of the world. So because of the state of the research and the information, like, shout out to Rachel Wilson. Thank you so much. Because of her research, being able to bring an animal back, and in fact, that animal having the maintenance of its own memories before freezing, very, very wealthy people are interested in cryonics. Two early cryonics organizations went bankrupt. Hold on. The practice of cryonics was not integrated into the mainstream clinical setting and was instead conducted on the cheap by a small number of enthusiasts. The early cryonics organization went bankrupt, allowing their patients to thaw out. At that point, the problem of massive cellular damage that occurs when ice crystals form in the body also became more widely known. As a result, cryonics acquired a reputation as a scam. The media controversy over the suspension of baseball star Ted Williams in 2002 showed that public perception of cryonics has not changed much over the past decades. Despite its image problem and its early failures of implementation, the cryonics community continues to be active, and it counts among its members several eminent scientists and intellectuals. Suspension protocols have been improved, and the infusion of cryonic technicants prior to freezing to suppress the formation of ice crystals has become standard practice. The prospect of nanotechnology has given a more concrete shape to the hypothesized future technology that could enable reanimation. There are currently two organizations that offer full suspension: the Alcor Life Extension Foundation, founded in 1972, and the Cryonics Institute, founded in 1976. Alcor has recently introduced a new suspension method, which relies on a process known as vitrification, which further reduces microstructural damage during suspension. And that's what I'm talking about, the vitrification. That's what I showed you at the earlier of the stream, is that vitrification is the process that they reanimate somebody from a cryonic freezing. So I've heard people criticize cryonics about, you're going to have all the ice crystals and the mat. Yes, that's not the current state of this, though. What they're now using is the process known as vitrification. And they, in fact, are bringing back animals that they freeze to death for periods of time. This is not theory. This is actual happenings. In the latter work, Man into Superman in 1972, Edinger discussed a number of conceivable technological improvements of the human organism, continuing the tradition started by Haldane and Bernal. Another early transhumanist was F.M. Esfandiari, who later changed his name to FM FM 2030. One of the first professors of future studies, FM taught at the New School for Social Research in New York in the 1960s and formed a group of optimistic futurists known as the Upwingers. This is a block quote. Who are the new revolutionaries of our time? They are the geneticists, the biologists, the physicists, the cryonologists, the biotechnologists, the nuclear scientists, the cosmologists, the radio astronomers, the cosmonauts, the social scientists, the Youth Corps volunteers, internationalists, humanists, science fiction writers, normative thinkers, inventors. They and others are revolutionizing the human condition in a fundamental way. Their achievements and goals go far beyond the most radical ideologies of the old order. Okay. Continuing on here. And in his book, You Are Transhuman, written in 1989, FM described what he regarded as the signs of the emergence of the transhuman. In FM's terminology, a transhuman is a, quote, transitional human, someone who, by virtue of their technology usage, cultural values, and lifestyle, constitutes an evolutionary link to the coming era of post-humanity. The signs that FM saw as indicative of transhuman status included prosthesis, plastic surgery, intensive care of telecommunications, a cosmopolitan outlook, and a globe-trotting lifestyle, androgyny, mediated reproduction, meaning in vitro fertilization, absence of religious belief, and a rejection of traditional family values. Let me read this again, guys, okay? So this is, again, this professor, famous throughout the end of the 20th century for his futurist ideas, says that these are the signs of the coming transhuman and post-human era, okay? See if they ring a bell and they sound like anything we might be critical of. The first one is plastic surgery, intensive use of telecommunications, social media, a cosmopolitan outlook and a globe-trotting lifestyle, globalism, multiculturalism, androgyny, transgenderism, feminized men, masculinized women, mediated reproduction such as in vitro fertilization, synthetic wombs, absence of religious belief, absolutely, and a rejection of traditional family values. However, it was never satisfactorily explained why somebody who, say, rejects family values has a nose job and spends a lot of time on jet planes, is in closer proximity to post-humanity than the rest of us. Oh gosh, what an idiot. Crap. Why does it do this? There we go. Okay. In 1970s and 80s, many organizations sprang up that focused on a particular topic such as life extensions, cryonics, space colonizations, science fiction, and futurism. These groups were often isolated from one another, and whatever shared views and values they had did not yet amount to any unified worldview. Ed Regis's great Mambo Chicken fringes, which included eccentric and otherwise intelligent... Great Mambo Chicken and the Transhumanist Condition, that was written in 1990, took a humorous look at these proto-transhumanist fringes, which included eccentric and otherwise intelligent individuals trying to build space rockets in their backyards and experimenting with biofeedback machines and psychedelic drugs, as well as scientists pursuing more serious lines of work, but who had imbibed too deeply of the Californian spirit. In 1988, the first issue of Extropy magazine was published by Max Moore and Tom Morrow. And in 1992, they found the Extropy Institute. The term extropy being coined as a metaphorical opposite of entropy, the Institute served as a catalyst that brought together disparate groups of people with futuristic ideas and facilitated the formation of novel mimetic compounds. The Institute ran a series of conferences, but perhaps most important was the Extropians mailing list, an online discussion forum where new ideas were shared and debated. In the mid-90s, many got first exposure to transhumanist views from the Extropy Institute's listserv. Moore had immigrated to California from Britain after changing his name from Max O'Connor. Of his new name, he said, it seemed to really encapsulate the essence of what my goal is. Always to improve, never to be static. I was going to get better at everything. Become smarter, fitter, and healthier. It would be a constant reminder to keep moving forward. And I love, too, that Natasha Vida Moore, so his wife, we're getting right down here, I don't know if she is an artist and designer, okay? Well, I think it's funny, isn't it? Providence isn't archetypal. Her name's Vita, Latin for like life, related to life. And so her name is Natasha Life Moore. He's Max Moore. Max to the limit Moore, right? It's funny how they do their names. Oh, it's cute. Max Moore wrote his first definition of transhumanism in the modern sense and created his own distinctive brand of transhumanism, extropianism,
which emphasize the principles of boundless expansion, self-transformation, dynamic optimism, intelligent technology, and spontaneous order. Originally, extropianism had a clear libertarian flavor. But in latter years, More has distanced himself from this ingredient, replacing, quote, spontaneous order with open society, a principle that opposes authoritarian social control and promotes decentralization of power and responsibility. Natasha Vita Moore, married to Max, is the Extropy Institute's current president. She is an artist and designer and has over the years issued a number of manifestos on transhumanist and extropic art. Now, she's the one that did the research with the rat, with cryonics. Now, her husband, Max Moore, that has now become one of his specialties is cryonics. His wife, Natasha, she did the experiment with the rat. This was all later after this article, by the way. The Extropies Institute conferences and mailing lists also served as a hangout place for some people who like to discuss futuristic ideas, but who are not necessarily joiners. Those who were around in the mid-90s will remember individuals such as Anders Sandberg, Alexander Sasha Chislenko, Hal Finney, Robin Hansen, and among the more thoughtful regulars in the transhumanist milieu at the time. An enormous amount of discussion about transhumanism has taken place on various email lists in the past decade. The quality of postings has been varied, putting it mildly. Yet at the best, these online conversations explored ideas about the implications of future technologies that were, in some respects, far advanced over what could have been found in printed books or journals. The internet played an important role in the incubating modern transhumanism by facilitating these meetings of minds, and perhaps more indirectly too via the irrational exuberance that pervaded the dot-com era. The World Transhumanist Association was founded in 1998 by Nick Bostrom. Now, again, that's Nick Bostrom talking about himself in the third person. He, in fact, the guy who's famous for being critical about AI and where it could go, in fact, founded the World Transhumanist Association. And it now, by the way, goes by the term Humanity Plus. Humanity Plus. There's no longer a World Transhumanist Association. Due to political infighting, there is now just Humanity Plus, which is basically a fully libertarian organization that is all about human modification and human advancement. So whatever you would like to do to your own body. In fact, Humanity Plus promotes, well, I forget what exactly they call it, trans species or whatever, where they believe that if you want to fuse yourself with animals or whatever, you can do so. It's opening up the potential, right? So, the two founding documents. So the World founded by Nick Bostrom and David Pierce to provide a general organizational basis for all transhumanist groups and academically interests across the political spectrum. The aim was also to develop a more mature and academically respectable form of transhumanism, freed from all the cultishness, which, at least in the eyes of some critics, had afflicted some of its earlier convocations. The two founding documents of the WTA, the World Transhumanist Association, were the Transhumanist Declaration, which is at the end here. Well, why don't we just read the Transhumanist Declaration real quick. The Transhumanist Declaration. Looky here. The Transhumanist Declaration. On what page were we on? We were on... we were on 12. Okay, 12. Okay, so the Transhumanist Declaration. Number one, here's the Transhumanist Declaration for all of us so we can know what they really believe. Here's the Transhumanist Nicene Creed. Number one, humanity will be radically changed by technology in the future. We foresee the feasibility of redesigning the human condition, including such parameters as the inevitability of aging, limitations on human and artificial intellects, unchosen psychology, suffering, and our confinement to the planet Earth. Number two, the Transhumanist Declaration. Systematic research should be put into understanding these coming developments and their long-term consequences. Number three, Transhumanists think that by being generally open and embracing new technology, we have a better chance of turning it to our advantage than if we try to ban or prohibit it. Number 4, transhumanists advocate the moral right of those who wish to use technology to extend their mental and physical, including reproductive capacities, and to improve their control over their own lives. We seek personal growth beyond our current biological limitations. Now, what I think is really interesting is in some of the recent discussions I looked at, these transhumanists like Max Moore and his wife, oh yeah, no, we're going to have transhumanist future, but if people just want to stay biological, they can. You know, that's their own desire if they want to stay behind. And then go look at how they felt about unvaccinated people and if they really want you to be able to have a choice. Transhumanists advocate for the moral right of those who wish to use technology. Okay. Seek personal growth beyond biological limitations. Okay. Number 5. In planning for the future, it is mandatory to take into account the prospect of dramatic progress in technological capabilities. It would be tragic if the potential benefits failed to materialize because of technophobia. Oh my gosh, you're a homophobe, a transphobe, and a technophobe? You're the ultimate freaking bigot. And unnecessary prohibitions. On the other hand, it would also be tragic if intelligent life went extinct because of some disaster or war involving advanced technologies. Number 6, we need to create forums where people can rationally debate these ideas to be done and a social order where reasonable decisions can be implemented. Does it sound like Elon Musk taking over Twitter? Number 7, the final declaration of the Transhumanist Declaration is that transhumanism advocates the well-being of all sentience, whether in artificial intellects, humans, post-humans, or non-human animals, and encompasses many principles of modern humanism. Transhumanism does not support any particular party, politician, or political platform. Okay. Now, back to where we were. So we were talking about the declaration. Okay. Yeah, the declaration was intended as a concise consensus statement of the basic principle of transhumanism. The FAQ was also a consensus or near consensus document, but it was ambitious in its philosophical scope and that it developed a number of themes that had been previously, at most, implicit in the movement. More than 50 people contributed comments on drafts of the FAQ. The document was produced by Bostrom, but major parts and ideas were also contributed by several others, including British utilitarian thinker David Pearce, Max Moore, the American feminist and disability rights activist Catherine Aegis, and the walking encyclopedia Anders Sandberg, who was at the time a neuroscience student in Sweden. The WTA's membership grew rapidly, and local chapters mushroomed around the world. Activities focused mainly on internet discussion, development of documents, representation in the media, organizing of an annual Transvision conference, and the publication of the scholarly online Journal of Transhumanism, later renamed the Journal of Evolution and Technology, of which published the article we're reading right now, for those of you who aren't aware. And the first few years of its existence, the WTA was a very loosely and informally organized structure. It entered its next phase after a meeting in 2001 between James Hughes, a sociologist at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, Mark Walker, a philosopher at the University of Toronto and the editor of the Journal of Transhumanism, and Nick Bostrom, who was at the time teaching at Yale. Hughes was selected secretary and has turned his organizing skills and energy to the task. Within short order, the World Transhumanist Association adopted a constitution, incorporated as a nonprofit, and began building up a vigorous international network of local groups and volunteers. Currently, the World Transhumanist Association, as of 2005, has approximately 3,000 members. It's much larger at this point. From more than 100 countries, and it pursues a wide range of activities, all voluntarily driven. A number of related organizations have also cropped up in recent years, focusing more narrowly on particular transhumanist issues. such as life extension, artificial intelligence, or legal implications of converging technologies. Nano, Bio, Info, Neurotechnologies. The Institute of Ethics in Emerging Technologies, a nonprofit think tank, was established in 2004, quote, to promote the ethical use of technology to expand human capacity. And what is their ethic, right? Because their ethic is that you didn't get jibby-jabbed, you are a danger. The academic frontier. Over the past couple of decades, academia has picked up the ball, started to analyze various transhumanist matters, both normative and positive. The contributions are far too many to comprehensively describe here, so we pick out just a few threads, beginning with ethics. Okay. For most of its history, moral philosophy did not shy away from addressing practical problems. In the early mid parts of the 20th century, during heydays of logical positivism, applied ethics became a backwater as moral philosophers concentrated on linguistic and meta-ethical problems. Since then, however, practical ethics has reemerged as a field of academic inquiry. The comeback started in medical ethics. Revelations of the horrific experiments that the Nazis had conducted on human subjects in the name of science led to the adoption of the Nuremberg Code and the Declaration of Helsinki, of which were all violated in 2020, but we don't have to get into that, which played down the strict safeguards for medical experimentation, emphasizing the need for patient consent. But the rise of modern health care systems spawned new ethical dilemmas. Turning off life support, organ donation, resource allocation, abortion, advanced directives, doctor-patient relationships, protocols for obtaining information, consent, and for dealing with incompetent patients. In the 1970s, a broader kind of inquiry began to emerge, stimulated particularly by developments in assisted reproduction and genetics. Yes, those are those synthetic wombs. This field became known as bioethics. Many of the ethical issues most directly linked to transhumanism would now fall under this rubric, although other normative discourses are also involved. Example given: population ethics, meta-ethics, political philosophy, and bioethics. Younger sisters, computer ethics, engineer ethics, environmental ethics. Bioethics was far from the beginning of an interdisciplinary endeavor dominated by theologians, legal scholars. It was from the beginning dominated by theologians, legal scholars, physicians, and increasingly philosophers, with occasional participation by representatives of patients, rights groups, disabilities, advocates, and other interested parties. Lacking a clear methodology and operating on a plane often swept by the winds of political and religious controversy, the standard of scholarship has frequently been underwhelming. Despite these difficulties, bioethics burgeoned. A cynic might ascribe this accomplishment to the ample fertilization that the field received from a number of practical imperatives, absolving doctors of moral dilemmas, training medical students to behave, enabling hospital boards to trumpet their commitment to the highest ethical standards of care, meaning, again, you won't be able to get into the hospital unless you're vaccinated, providing sound bites for the mass media, of course, and allowing politicians to cover their behinds by delegating controversial issues to ethics committees. But a kinder gloss is possible. Decent people recognize that the difficult moral problems arose in modern biomedicine and that these problems needed to be addressed, and that having some professional scholars trying to clarify these problems to some sort of systematic way might be helpful. While higher caliber scholarship and a more robust methodology would be nice, in the meantime, we make the most of what we have. Moral philosophers have in the last decade made many contributions that bear on the ethics of human transformation, and we must limit ourselves to a few mentions. Derek Parfit's classic Reasons and Persons, printed in 1984, discussed many relevant normative issues. In addition to personal identity, and this is a big one, is what is identity and intentionality. So based on their own, so intentionality is a big one in regards to neuroscience and then theories of personhood, because it gets into what is intentionality in regards to a computer and a person. And one of the debates right now is, say they could totally map your brain, which again, they believe if they could really map your entire brain and they could reform your entire neural network and get the neural network that you're existing as right now, because all you are is your brain, that then if they activated that one over there, you would then appear as you are now. The question is, would you still be the same person? Say the remodeled digital brain does cause the phenomenon of emergent mind or consciousness. The question then is, would that conscious, digitally created, mapped mind, even though it's mapped on my biology, is it still me? Or would that conscious entity be a different me? And would that conscious entity have the same intention, the intentionality of myself? And this gets into, again, the concepts of personal identity. So that's what he's referring to there. Discussed many of the relevant normative issues in addition to personal identity and foundational ethical theory. This book treats population ethics, person affecting moral principles and duties to future generations. Of course, too many people on the planet. Although Parfit's analysis takes place on an idealized level, his arguments elucidate many moral considerations that emerge within the transhumanist program. Jonathan Glover's What Sort of People Should There Be? In 1984, addressed technology-enabled human transformation at a somewhat more concrete level, focusing especially on genetics and various technologies that could increase social transparency. Glover gave a clear and balanced analytic treatment of these issues that was well ahead of its time. His general conclusion is that, quote, not just any aspect of present human nature is worth preserving. Rather, it is especially those features which contribute to self-development and self-expression, to certain kinds of relationships, and to the development of our consciousness and understanding, and some of these features may be extended rather than threatened by technology. Problem is, they don't even know what consciousness is. That's what's so annoying. It's like listening to some of these Crucible debates, like the one that Jim Bob did just recently with Vegan Gains. Vegan Games keeps talking about a mind, and yet he has no concept of a mind. He has no definition of a mind. He didn't have a worldview that would allow for a mind outside of an emergent process. And so these same people, these transhumanists, want to talk about consciousness and mind and personal identity and self. What are you guys talking about? You don't even have, nobody has a definition of what consciousness is. That's the whole problem with the state of neuroscience right now, is the hard problem, the problem of mind and consciousness, had basically brought neuroscience and the philosophy of mind and stuff to an end. In fact, there's many movements to go back to Aristotelian concepts of like hylomorphism, that maybe the mind is attached to the concept of a soul. And you're seeing that particularly amongst Catholic theologians and philosophers rebringing back hylomorphism, Aristotelian hylomorphism. Anyways, I digress. Several people have argued for principles that assert some kind of ethical equivalence between environmental and genetic interventions. For example, Peter Singer has proposed that the preventative principle. For any condition X, it would be a form of child abuse for parents to inflict X on their child soon after birth. Then it must, other things being equal, at least be permissible to take steps to prevent one's child having that condition. Oh, so this is CRISPR. This is basically CRISPR technology. Julian Savulescu has argued for a principle of procreative beneficence. Oh, wow, look how nice that sounds. That sounds so nice. Procreative beneficence. According to which prospective parents should select the child of the possible children they could have. Who would have the best life based on the relevant available information, where the should is meant to indicate that persuasion is justified, but not just coercion. This principle does not presuppose that all lives can be placed on a definite ranking with cases, with respect to all well-being. Only that pair-wise comparisons are possible in at least some cases. For instance, if a couple is having IFV, that's in vitro fertilization, and must select one of two embryos which are genetically identical, except from the one of them has one defective gene that presupposes asthma, the procreative beneficence suggests that they ought to choose the healthier embryo, the one without the asthma gene. for implementation. Now, again, even though it has the asthma gene doesn't mean it's going to become active. That's a whole nother thing in regards to genetics and CRISPR, is even though you're beginning to edit the genetic line, not all the genes are expressed. That's the whole thing about phenotypes. Okay. From Chance to Choice 2000, Alan Buchanan, Dan Brock, Norman Daniels, and Daniel Wickler examine how advances in genetic engineering should affect our understanding to distributive justice, equal opportunity, our rights and obligations as parents, the meaning of disability, and the concept of human nature and ethical theory and practice. Oh, wow. They developed a framework inspired by John Rawls' work in an attempt to answer some of these questions. Greg Stock, John Harris, Gregory Pence, and Eric Ljungqvist, among others, have also discussed the ethics of genetic engineering from a broadly transhumanist perspective. Mark Walker has argued from a perfectionist standpoint that we have a duty to use technology to improve ourselves. Walker has also argued that one reason to pursue cognitive enhancements is that it could help us all solve philosophical problems. Nick Bostrom and several others have drawn attention to the distinction between enhancements that offer only positional advantages, i.e. increase in height, which are only advantages insofar as others lack them, and enhancements that provide either intrinsic benefits or net positive externalities, such as a better immune system or the improvement of cognitive functioning. We ought to promote enhancements of the second kind, not of the enhancements that are merely just positional. Bostrom, again, the guy who's writing this article, I love how he always uses himself third person. I get it, it's a scholarly article, but still. Bostrom has suggested that we have a reason to develop means to explore the larger space of possible modes of being. That is currently inaccessible to us because of our biological limitations, on the ground that we might find that it contains extremely worthwhile modes of being, ways of living, thinking, feeling, and relating. Along with many other transhumanist writers, Bostrom has argued for the moral urgency to develop means to slow or reverse the aging process. He has also proposed a broader conception of the human dignity which can accommodate post-human dignity. Oh, yes, post-human dignity. That's the problems they're concerned about. A recent joint paper by Bostrom and Toby Ord proposes a heuristic for eliminating, quote, status quo bias in bioethics, a bias which they claim afflicts many of our moral institutions, unfortunately. Eliezer Yudkowsky, an independent scholar, has probed the ethics of superintelligence and has tried to develop a theory of how to program a human-friendly AI, a challenge that could take on life and death significance once we become capable of creating such a machine. Yudkowsky argues that simple rule-based injunctions, such as Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, would produce deadly unintended consequences. He conceives of a superintelligence as an enormously powerful optimization process, and the central task to specify the mental architecture and goal structure of the AI is such a way that it realizes desirable outcomes. Rather than creating a list of specific goals, Yudkowsky argues that we need to take a more indirect approach and choose the AI's initial conditions so that it would use its superior intellectual powers to derive the specific goals and extrapolate our decisions if we were better calibrated, better informed, and better able to reflect on the forces influencing our decisions. Yudkowsky also wishes to specify an AI that would use its initial rules for extrapolation to extrapolate smarter human decisions about extrapolation rules. In effect, a set of initial rules for extrapolation would renormalize themselves. Aside from normative questions, there are also positive questions to be asked about the nature and timing of transforming technologies and their consequences. Hans Moravec, 1989 book Mind Children, explored the ramifications of possible future advances in robotics and uploading. A later Moravec book, Robot, published in 1999, and Ray Kurzweil's best-selling The Age of Spiritual Machines, published in 1999, introduced these ideas to a wider audience. As we have seen, Eric Drexler was trying to anticipate the consequences of molecular nanotechnology back in the 80s, an endeavor in which he has since been joined by several other researchers such as Robert Freitas and Ralph Merkel, who has collaborated with Freitas to study the kinematics of self-replicating systems and the technical steps towards crude molecular assemblers. All these authors recognize that the technologies as potent as technologies as potent as superintelligence or molecular nanotechnology are not without serious risk or accidents of deliberate misuse. Bostrom, in 2012, introduced the concept of an existential risk, defined, quote, one where an adverse outcome would either annihilate Earth-originating intelligent life or permanently and drastically curtail its potential, unquote, and created a catalog of what he saw as the most probable existential risk. Both nanotechnology and superintelligence-related risk attain high risk on that list. In a much-discussed popular article, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, in 2000, Bill Joy, which obviously is a very joyful man to write such an article, argued that we ought to relinquish developments in AI, nanotechnology, and genetics because of the risk that will eventually emerge from these disciplines. Well, I can agree with him there. Several people reacting to Joy argued against such bans on grounds that they are unrealistic and would deprive us of great benefits and might increase rather than decrease the risk of development if they were driven underground to less hesitant regions of the world. John Leslie, Martin Rees, and Richard Posner have also investigated threats to human survival in the 21st century. All of them have rated the risk as highly significant. Yeah, it is highly significant. Robin Hanson has analyzed several topics of relevance to human transformation, including the consequences of uploading an unregulated economy, the social signaling function of beliefs, the sources of epistemological status of disagreements of opinion, the dynamics of a space colonization race, and formation markets as a system for aggregating information and guiding policy. Related to Hanson's work on upload competition and colonization races, Bostrom has explored how dystopian outcomes could result in some future evolutionary scenarios. Drawing on his earlier work on observation selection efforts, he has also formulated the simulation argument, which purports to show that it follows some of the fairly weak assumptions that, here's a block quote, and again, he believes, Bostrom, that it's more likely we're in a simulation than not. At least one of the following propositions is true. The human species is very likely to go extinct before reaching a post-human stage. Or, 2, any post-human civilization extremely unlikely to run a significant number of simulations of their evolutionary history or variations thereof. Or 3, we're almost certainly living in a computer simulation. It follows that the belief that there is a significant chance that we will one day become post-humans who run ancestor simulations is false unless we are currently living in a simulation. No, we're not living in a simulation. And 2, you're not going to be able to do that. You people are absolutely mad and crazy. Gosh. We do not know what will happen, but several subtle constraints enable us to narrow down the range of tenable views about humanity's future and our place in the universe. These constraints derive from a variety of sources, including analysis and capacities of possible technologies based on physical and chemical simulations, economic analysis, evolutionary theory, probability theory, game theory and strategic analysis, and cosmology, partly because of the interdisciplinary and sometimes technical nature of these considerations. They are not widely understood, yet any serious attempt to grapple with the long-term implications of technological development should take them into account. Section 6, 21st century biopolitics, the transhumanist bioconservative dimension. So now we enter the conversation of the time period we're in, the 21st century. Shout out to everybody who's still here. Please hit that like for everybody. I really appreciate all the super chats, guys. I'll be getting to those in just a few. Shout out to all the super chatters. Shout out to the Orthodox Logos. I see he sent one in. We'll be getting to the super chats in just a moment here. So we are almost done with the article. Okay, now the 21st century section. Here we go. James Hughes has argued that biopolitics is emerging as a fundamental new dimension of political opinion. And Hughes's model, biopolitics joins with the more familiar dimensions of cultural and economic politics to form a three-dimensional opinion space. We have already seen that in the early 90s, the extropians combined liberal cultural politics and laissez-faire economic politics with transhumanist biopolitics. Quote, in The Citizen Cyborg, written in 2004 by Hughes, sets forward what he terms democratic transhumanism, which mates transhumanist biopolitics with social democratic economic policies and liberal cultural politics. He argues that we will achieve the best post-human future when we ensure that technologies are safe, make them available to everyone, and respect the right of individuals to control their own bodies. The key difference between extropian transhumanism and democratic transhumanism is that the latter accords a much bigger role for government in regulating new technologies for safety and ensuring that the benefits will be available to all, not just a wealthy, tech-savvy elite. In principle, transhumanism can be combined with a wide range of political and cultural views, and many such combinations are indeed represented within the memberships of the World Transhumanist Association. One combination that is not often found is the coupling of transhumanism and a culture-conservative outlook. Whether this is because of an irresolvable tension between the transformative agenda of transhumanism and the cultural conservative preference for traditional arrangements is not clear. It could instead be because nobody has yet seriously attempted to develop such a position. It is possible to imagine how new technologies could be used to reinforce some culture-conservative values. For instance, a pharmaceutical that facilitated long-term pair bonding could help protect the traditional family. Developing ways of using our growing technological powers to help people realize widely held cultural and spiritual values in their lives would seem like a worthwhile undertaking. This is not, however, the route which cultural conservatives have so far opted. Instead, they have gravitated towards transhumanism's opposite, bioconservatism, which opposes the use of technology to expand human capacities or to modify aspects of our biological nature. I think it's ultimately a theological question. People drawn to bioconservatism come from groups that traditionally have had little in common. Right-wing religious conservatives and left-wing environmentalists and anti-globalists have found common causes. For example, in their opposition to the genetic modification of humans. The different strands of contemporary bioconservatism can be traced to a multifarious set of origins. Ancient notions of taboo, the Greek concept of hubris, the Romanticist view of nature, certain religious anti-humanistic interpretations of the concept of human dignity and a God-given natural order. How dare those people believe in a God-given natural order? Oh. The Luddite workers' revolt against industrialization, Karl Marx's analysis of technology under capitalism. Then that's why David Noble, he is a Marxist. That's why he's against technology. Various continental philosophers' critiques of technology, technocracy, and the rationalistic mindset that accompanies modern technoscience. Foes of the military-industrial complex and multinational corporations. Oh, how dare those foes? Foes of the military-industrial complex. These must be really bad actors. And foes of the multinational corporations and objectors to the consumerist rat race. The proposed remedies have ranged from machine smashing to the original Luddites, to communist revolution, Marx, to buying organic, to yoga, to Jose Ortega. But nowadays, it commonly emanates and calls for national and international bans on various human enhancement technologies. Feminist writers have come down on both sides of the debate. Eco-feminists have suspected biotechnology, especially of its use to reshape bodies or control reproduction, of being an extension of traditional patriarchal exploitation of women, or alternatively, have seen it as a symptom of a control-obsessed, unemphatic, gadget-fixated, body-loathing mindset. Oh my gosh. Can you believe those men? Some have offered a kind psychoanalysis of transhumanism, concluding that it represents an embarrassing rationalization of self-centered immaturity and social failure. But others have welcomed the liberatory potential, or I guess liberatory potential of biotechnology. Shulamith Firestone argued in the feminist classic The Dialectic of Sex in 1971 that women will be fully liberated when technology has freed them from having to incubate children. Let's hear that one again. Again, Shulamith Firestone, feminist, writing the classic The Dialect of Sex in 1971, said that women will be fully liberated only when technology has freed them from having to incubate children. Feminists hate life and they hate kids. Cyber feminist Dana Haraway says that she would, quote, rather be a cyborg than a goddess. I'm not surprised. And argues against the dualistic view that associates men with culture and technology and women with nature. Perhaps the most prominent bioconservative voice today is that of Leon Kass, chairman of President Bush's Council on Bioethics. Kass acknowledges an intellectual debate of three other distinguished bioconservatives: Protestant theologian Paul Ramsey, Christian apologist C.S. Lewis, and German-born philosopher-theologian Hans Jonas, who studied under Martin Heidegger. Kass's concerns center on human dignity and the subtle ways in which our attempts to assert technological mastery over human nature could end up dehumanizing us by the undermining of various traditional meanings, such as the meaning of the life cycle, the meaning of sex, the meaning of eating, the meaning of work. Kass is well known for his advocacy of the wisdom of repugnance, which echoes Hans Jonas's heuristics of fear. While Kass stresses that a gut feeling of revulsion is not a moral argument, he nevertheless insists that the yuck factor merits a respectful attention. This is the block quote. In crucial cases, repugnance is the emotional expression of deep wisdom. Beyond reason's power to fully articulate, we insult and feel immediately and without argument the violation of things we rightfully hold dear. To pollution and preservation, to fitting response can only be horror and revulsion. And conversely, generalized horror and revulsion are prima facie evidence of foulousness and violation. Now, Francis Fukuyama, another prominent bioconservative and member of President's Council, has recently identified transhumanism as the world's most dangerous idea, unquote. For Fukuyama, however, the chief concern is not about the subtle undermining of meanings, but the prospect of violence and oppression. He argues that liberal democracy depends on the fact that all humans share an undefined factor X, which grounds their equal dignity and rights. The use of enhancing technology, he fears, would destroy the unifying factor X. Bioethicist George Annas, Laurie Andrews, and Rosario Isai have proposed legislation to make inheritable genetic modification in humans a crime against humanity, like torture and genocide. Their rationale is similar to Fukuyama's. Block quote: the new species, or post-human, will likely view the old normal human as inferior, even savages, and fit for slavery and slaughter. The normals, on the other hand, may see the posthumans as a threat, and if they can, may engage in a preemptive strike by killing the posthumans before they themselves are killed or enslaved by them. It is ultimately this predictable potential of genocide that makes species-altering experiments potential weapons of mass destruction and makes the unaccountable genetic engineer a potential bioterrorist. I like that. There is some common ground between Annas and the transhumanists. They agree that murder and enslavement, whether by humans or post-humans or the other way around, would be a moral atrocity and a crime. Transhumanists deny, however, that this is a likely consequence of germline theory to enhance health, memory, longevity, or other similar traits in humans. If And when we develop the capability to create some singular entity that would potentially destroy the human race, such as a super intelligent machine, we could indeed regard it as a crime against humanity and proceed without a thorough risk of analysis and the installation of adequate safety features. As we saw in the previous section, the effort to understand and find ways to reduce existential risk has been a central preoccupation for some transhumanists such as Eric Drexler, Nick Bostrom, and Eliezer Yudkowsky. There are other commonalities between bioconservatism and transhumanism. Both agree that we face realistic prospect that technology could be used to substantially transform the human condition in this century. Both agree that this imposes an obligation on the current generation to think hard about the practical and ethical implications. Both are concerned with medical risk or side effects. Of course, although bioconservatives are more worried that the technology might succeed than that it might fail, both camps agree that technology in general and medicine in particular have a legitimate role to play. Although bioconservatives tend to oppose many uses of medicine that go beyond therapy to enhancement, both sides condemn the racist and coercive state-sponsored eugenics programs of the 20th century. Bioconservatives draw attention to the possibility that subtle human values could get eroded by technological advances, and transhumanists should perhaps learn to be more sensitive to these concerns. On the other hand, transhumanists emphasize the enormous potential for genuine improvements in human well-being and human flourishing that are attainable only via technological transformation, and bioconservatives could try to be more appreciative of the possibility that we could realize great values by venturing beyond our current biological limitations. And guys, that concludes our stream and our reading of this article here, The History of Transhumanist Thought by Nick Bostrom, faculty philosopher at the Oxford University, written in 2005. So that is actually going to conclude our stream, guys. I hope that was useful. Again, to summarize the history of transhumanist thought, mostly we focused on the 20th century, the development of some of these ideas, that the extension of man's technology. We kind of began by talking about this book here, The Religion of Technology by David Noble, and how the Western forms of Christianity during the medieval period began to associate man's extension of himself through technology as us moving back to our pre-lapsarian, pre-fallen state. And I think that sort of Gnostic, self-divinizing pursuit is accurate, and it is accurate to the West. And I think the natural consequence is people are no longer Christian. What they are, they're going to be secular transhumanists who believe in our sort of existential purpose to self-divinize ourselves. And so this whole thing about transhumanism is all based on human potential, and that's how they shroud it, as this is a spiritual reality. This is spiritual because we're going to extend human potential. It's all about life extension and, of course, us becoming space-faring entities. They want to talk about ethics and morality, but all these people are Darwinist materialists who don't even have a grounding for universal ethics and morality outside a social construction. So that's going to conclude our stream. I know it was a bit long. It was a bit heady. There was a lot of reading. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world when I'm reading. However, I hope if you stayed and paid attention and followed along, that it was useful. There's a lot of good information there that really lays out how the transhumanists, like Nick Bostrom, major advocate, right, founder of the World Transhumanist Association, how he views the history of transhumanist thought, and how he views the current debate against bioconservatives and our bioconservative resistance to some of the nano and artificial technologies that they've created. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to dive into the super chats. Please smash that like. I hope you enjoyed today's stream. And if you would like to support, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm now going to read some of the super chats. All right, first super chat comes from my brother from another mother. Dr. Mo throws in $50 for the war effort. God bless. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mo. God bless you, brother, and thank you so much for the generous super chat that he sent early into the stream. that this was great. And I really appreciate it, man. God bless you. Dr. Mo, he's in the process of a bit of a life transition, and he is on the move, and he is going to be opening up a sort of new chapter of his life. So everybody keep Michael Moeller in your prayers as he begins to move about and open up a new chapter in his life. So God bless you, Dr. Mo, and thank you so much, brother, for a $50 super chat. That's very, very generous, bro. Thank you so much. Again, Dr. Mo says, for the war effort. God bless. Well, God bless. Next one comes from our brother Theoriazone. Throws in $5, no comment. Thank you so much, Theoriazone, for the super chat, $5 super chat. Really appreciate it. God bless you, brother, and the family. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe and staying warm. I don't know if you're in Ohio or if you're back in Hawaii. If you're in Hawaii, I'm sure it's very nice there. I'm jealous. If you're back in Ohio, then you experience the cold weather I'm experiencing. So good, but don't know where you're at. God bless you, Theoriazone. Hope you're doing well, bro. Next super chat comes from our beloved sister, Rachel Wilson. Shout out to the Wilsons. Rachel Wilson says, happy Thanksgiving from the Wilson family. Great show as always. Well, thank you so much, Rachel Wilson. God bless you. And shout out to Andrew and shout out to the rest of the Wilson family. Hope everybody is doing good. God bless you all. And thank you so much to the Wilson family for the support. Shout out to Andrew. Thank you, brother, for the support. And definitely Rachel. Thank you guys so freaking much. Really appreciate your friendship, and thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. God bless you guys, and really want to get up to Michigan at some point and see you and spend some more time face-to-face with you guys. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate the friendship and love you all. Next one comes from the Orthodox Logos. Shout out to our brother over at the Orthodox Logos, Schema Beats, Ian. He says, love you, brother. Throws in $50. Very generous super chat. Thank you so much, Ian, with the $50 super chat. Says, love you, brother. God bless. Pray for me. The motorcycle accident got me good. Bro, I have been praying for you. I saw the video again, or not the video, the photos. I saw the video you made, but the photos that you posted, our brother, Schema Beats, the Ian who runs the Orthodox Logos, he got into a really bad motorcycle accident. It sounds like somebody pulled out in front of him right before he was getting ready to come home. He was getting his bike ready to sell and got into a pretty bad accident. And pray for him and his family. I think he's in a tough position, but glory to God, it wasn't worse. I mean, his face is scraped up. He got his left hand's really scraped up. That's all wrapped up, and so. Yeah, God bless you, brother. Really glad that it wasn't worse, geez. And definitely we'll be praying for you and the family. Hope everything continues well and that you recover 100%. I don't know. It sounded like your hand was, I'm not positive. I thought you said your hand was broken, but yeah. Pretty bad accident. He had to definitely go to the hospital and scrapes everywhere. His face, his hands, and I believe his left hand is broken. So God bless Ian, again, our brother over at the Orthodox Logos, and also Schema Beats made some music for the channel, also an artist. And again, throws in a very generous super chat of $50. Says, love you, brother. Love you guys. Love you and the family. Hope you guys are doing well. I was able to meet Ian face to face, man. When I went over, I was actually over at Father Josiah Trenum's church. So went to St. Andrews for the first night of a conference, and lo and behold, who comes up to me and said, and it's Ian. And so shout out to you, brother. It was great to meet you and the wife in person. Really hope that we can spend time. I'd like to come down to Arizona and hang with you guys again. So hopefully that will be an option in the future, man. We will definitely be praying for you, and hope that you get well soon, man. Rest, take care of yourself, sleep as much as you can. Again, God bless Ian, the Orthodox Logos. He throws in $50, very generous, and says, "Love you, brother. God bless. Pray for me. The motorcycle accident got me good." Yeah, it definitely got you good, man. And God bless it wasn't worse, Glory be to God, because how many people die in motorcycle accidents? I was one time I saw a motorcycle accident, and it was terrible. The guy, again, I don't know, but the guy probably died. So be careful if you're a motorcycle rider. I've always wanted to, especially for the sense of freedom. It seems like the ultimate sense of freedom is cruising around on a motorcycle. But my mother, her first husband, actually was killed in a motorcycle accident, and so my mom would never let me get a motorcycle. She would absolutely be horrified because she's obviously has that life experience. So motorcyclists, all you riders out there, be careful, man. Be careful. You never know what's going to happen. It ain't like it used to be. So shout out to Ian and the Orthodox Logos and his family. Hope everybody's doing well. I know you're not. I know you've been doing better. There's certainly you've been better for sure. But God bless you, man. And the last super chat comes from Dean Lim 2. Dean Lim 2 throws in $10, no comment. Well, thank you so much, Dean Lim 2. I really appreciate the $10 super chat. Thank you very, very much. And guys, that looks like it's going to do. Yeah, they are the most freeing until you're dead. Yeah, basically. That's the problem with the motorcycles. It seems like the ultimate expression and experience of male freedom. But my gosh, with the way that people drive now, and especially with all the women on the road, women can't drive. Come on. No, I'm kidding. I'm halfway serious. I know it's sexist. I apologize. I'm a bigot. But yeah, be careful, all the motorcyclists out there. You never know. And so thank God our brother Ian is okay. He's alive. He's still kicking. He's here with us. And hopefully it's just some things that will heal over time. So God bless you, Ian, and the wife. Hope you all are doing well. Special shout out to all the super chatters. Special shout out to the Wilson family. Rachel Wilson, love you guys. Hope everybody's well. Definitely, we got to meet up soon. And then shout out to Theoria Zone. And shout out to Dr. Mo. God bless you, bro. And hope all is well. That's going to take care of the super chats. Again, guys, please hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate that. And share the stream. If you know anybody who might be interested in this content, please share it. I would greatly appreciate that. I will be back Monday. Monday we'll be doing our sponsor stream from Jeremy Hosey, good friend. I've actually known Jeremy personally too. He's here in Indiana, and met him over at All Saints in Bloomington, and went to Orthodox Church and met him. And so he wanted me to do a stream on Bowling Alone: The Collapse and Revival of American Community by Robert Putnam. This is a great, phenomenal book, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. And we will be diving into this most likely Monday. I like to allow a day in between my streams, and so I will be back Monday evening with the sponsored stream of Bowling Alone, although I'm going to title it something a little bit different. So I will see you all hopefully then. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a blessed Sunday. Hope most of you guys go to liturgy, and as always,